So this might be one of the most bizarre stories. My sister, she pretended our parents passed away so she can take advantage of that and get us to sign a paper that essentially will give us every single bit of the inheritance handed over to her. Well, you know what? I'm on to her, and her plan is so stupid. Let me expose it. My older sister, let's call her Caroline, has always been a control freak. All the way back when we were really little, I'm talking 5 or 6 years old, she would tell us how to play, how to brush our teeth, what TV programs we should watch. She even told us how to chew our food. It was absolutely awful. My brother, 27, let's call him James, he has type 1 diabetes, and our sister would insist on tracking what he ate and how much he exercised. She would always, quote, volunteer to read his blood sugar. I mean, it wasn't really volunteering, she forced him to do it. And he always let her because he was such a little kid. You can imagine how my parents felt about this? Well, maybe you can't. Maybe some of you have parents who would take one look at such a controlling little girl and nip that in the bud. Put an end to that right then and there by introducing what was become maybe the most important word in my life. Boundaries. Freaking boundaries. I wish I'd learned about this concept sooner, and maybe I would not have suffered so much with Caroline. My parents, though, thought she was responsible. It was a real load off of them knowing that James' blood sugar was red and Caroline was looking out for the both of us. Both of our parents worked full-time. My dad is a mechanic and my mom is a secretary at school. We didn't have a lot of money. We were middle class, and there wasn't extra money to hire a babysitter. No grandparents either, because both of my parents are immigrants and their parents stayed behind. So enter Caroline to fill the child-mending gap. Sometimes I wonder whether Caroline is like this because my parents relied on her so much, or if they relied on her so much because she is like this. It's a chicken and the egg kind of question that I'll probably never get to the bottom of. Maybe I don't need to. I can't change the past. All I can do is focus on the present. The problem is that Caroline never seemed to develop any awareness of her controlling behavior. While I started to get my period in middle school, she actually began to track my menstrual cycle. She would tell me things like, "Oh, you're just getting grumpy because it's that time of the month." Well, you know what? I was grateful for that information, but honestly, I could have just looked it up online. I did not need her creepy, controlling nonsense in what was already a really stressful time for me. She did other things too. She found a nudie magazine that James was hiding under his bed and got him to admit where he got it from. A kid in his karate class. Instead of handling the matter with some discretion and sensitivity to James' feelings, Caroline became the morality police. She went to the friend's house and told his parents. Can you even imagine? She convinced our parents to give her our allowance so that she could decide how we spent our money. The worst part was how she responded if you did not do things the way she wanted you to do them. First, she would look at you like she was going to kill you. Sometimes, if she was really mad, she would go into the screaming fit. She would call me every name in the book, although always when our parents could not hear. Or she would grab us by the arm and twist it or pinch us until we gave in to what she was demanding. If, at that point, we still resisted, she would find ways to torture us, like pretending she had locked us outside of the house in freezing weather, or hacking into our email accounts and sending out our private messages to other friends on our contact list. Yeah, the whole time she managed to do this without tipping off Mom and Dad, who continued to think that she was super responsible. Caroline, if they confronted her, she straight up lied, and they bought every single word that came out of her little mouth. It made me sick, and it made me absolutely enraged. And yet, for a long time, I did not realize how wrong it was. It was not until I was in my teenage years and started to tell my friends about the way that Caroline behaved that I understood what she was doing. It was abuse. So, I tried to tell James, but at first he got scared. He was scared of Caroline, and the idea of talking about her behind his back terrified him. I realized that he was even more traumatized than I was. Maybe because he had a fewer friends and because when he was really little, He had been taught, because of the diabetes, that Caroline was almost like his nurse. Eventually, after I moved out, James came to agree that it was abuse. He was afraid of using that word, especially with our parents who thought that we were just overreacting. When I was 17, I decided that I did not need Mom and Dad's permission anymore. If I did not want to live with an abuser, I didn't have to. I already had a job working as a server at Denny's, after school and on the weekends. I packed up some things and went to live with a girl that I worked with who had already graduated high school. A year later, I graduated too and was looking for a better job. I found one, as a personal assistant at a talent agency. 4 years later, I had become a talent agent myself and was starting to earn pretty good money on commission. Of course, it was scary to leave at 17. My parents were really disappointed in me at first, and, I also felt bad about leaving James at home alone. He had started taking classes at the community college, but was still living with Caroline, Mom, and Dad. Caroline was in her 20s at the point and was going out with this guy named Oliver, who she's now married to. See, Oliver's family owned a chain of bakeries, and Caroline oversaw quality control in the industrial facility. It was kind of the perfect job for her, because she could be as anal and bossy as she even wanted to be. And it was basically in her job description. I heard that there were some complaints from the staff who did not like the way that she treated them. But the upshot is that during that time, the bakery started to make more money, and Oliver's family liked her a lot. Well, to each their own, I guess. After I moved out, I tried to stay away from home as much as possible. If I wanted to see James or our parents, I would set up a coffee date in another part of the town or invite them over to dinner. Caroline hated this, as you can imagine. I never invited her, only once or twice, because my parents pressured me. She married Oliver, and they had their own house in the suburbs, a big, ugly McMansion that she could just lord over as much as she wanted. Within a few years, they had a couple of children, and then Caroline had more people she could mold and abuse with her control freak behavior. I felt so sorry for those kids, and of course I went to visit them when they were born. They were so perfect, so tiny, and already Caroline was controlling every aspect of their experience. We weren't allowed to hold them, only she was. Not even Oliver was allowed to dress or feed them because he might do it wrong. Poor guy. He just stood there grinning like a fool as his wife bossed everybody around. Just like that. Well, Caroline would still try to get me via social media. I honestly could not believe how persistent she was. Well, at first it was a comment here or there, as if to say, "I'm still here, I'm still watching you." Well, that was fine. She could comment all she wanted, but I did not care. Then she started talking to my friends and posting things on my wall on Facebook about what I've been doing in my photos. For example, "Nice dress at the GG party, but why did you not go with the green one, girl? Gray washes you out." And I'd be like, "Girl, you did not." I just can't let this stuff go like that from most people. But I'm great at letting others know when they've crossed a line. Like I say, boundaries. But with Caroline, it's another story. She's really just getting under my skin. She knows it and knows how to manipulate it, saying just the thing that will put you on defense. That's how she gets her superpower. By getting other people to feel like they have to respond to her. I'd say the worst thing is that you can do to Caroline is ignore her. So, that's what I've been doing for the last few years. James, too, and you know what? It worked. Well, sort of. She did not go away entirely, and she kept trying to send us messages via our parents, so I eventually just had to block her on socials. James doesn't have them, so it was not an issue for him. He still lives at home, though, so it's harder to avoid her, Well, I think he just leaves when she's there. After a while, I had to tell Mom and Dad that I did not want to hear anything about Caroline, and it broke their heart, I think. But at the same time, I got the impression that they were finally getting it, that Caroline had an absolute control problem. And it started to push the people in her life away. Still, it did not prepare them for what happened the other day. Every summer, Mom and Dad go away for 2 months to a cabin that belongs to one of our uncles, Uncle Ron, who I guess was friends with my grandpa back in the day. Ron is a funny guy, a bachelor that we always suspected was either gay or just totally uninterested in romance or anything. He made a lot of money in the .com boom in the 90s, so he traveled a lot and had houses worldwide. This cabin is near Killarney, was way up north, and I guess Ron uses it for ice fishing in the winter. Mom and Dad spent their honeymoon there, so every year for their anniversary they drive 6 hours to the cabin and just spend the week there. Well, I never really wanted to imagine what they were doing up there. Ew. Dad calls it the yearly Spice Your Marriage Up retreat, and that's as far as I've ever wanted to imagine. Of course, as they've gotten older, it's a little stressful for us, knowing that they're alone up there with nobody around for miles. My folk had us when they were already in their late 30s, so Dad is almost 70. He's a tough guy, but you never know, his heart isn't really 100% since he developed sleep apnea. So, if something, ever happened to him, how could Mom get help? She doesn't drive, there's no cell phone service, and every once in a while you see other fishermen on the lake, but that doesn't count for much in an emergency, now does it? Well, anyways, this year, there were bad wildfires up where the cabin was, and not in the country itself, but close enough that it left a blanket of haze over everything and made swimming, boating, and hiking unpleasant to say the least. So, my parents just decided to drive around the different counties up north, visiting old friends and staying inside until the smoke from the fire dissipates. Toward the end of this tour, they decided to drop in on me. My place is a few hours outside of the city, not exactly close to it, but not nearly as far. So, I was the last stop before they returned to the cabin. They still had a month up there, and the fires have been put out several days ago, and the smoke was even clearing up. My folks are not very great at communicating. They show up and expect that I'll be home, which is okay since they are such good company, and I usually am at home. So, I invited them in and made some coffee. I guess they've forgotten to turn their cell phones back on after being out of range. Otherwise, I probably would have gotten an alert from them. I'd convinced my mom to let me set up location sharing for when they went away, so I wouldn't have to worry as much. That's the real difference between Caroline and me, and I actually worry about people's well-being, and she pretends to worry so she can influence what you do. Well, we had just sat down to have coffee, and Dad was telling a boring story about finding animal tracks or poop, or something, around the cabin. So my phone starts to vibrate, and I assumed it was work, so I excused myself and entered the bedroom. It was Caroline. She was crying. So I asked her what's wrong, and I may loathe her controlling ways, but she's still my sister. Through snobs and sniffles, I heard her say, "They're gone. They're gone." Well, I asked her what she's talking about, and my first thought was that something had happened to my nephews and Oliver. So I broke out into a cold sweat as I imagined that they've been in some terrible accident. Maybe their car flipped over, or they've been at a school event, and it was all just awful things that the stuff you see on the news. Well, she told me our mom and dad were gone. She said that she had just found out and that she's gotten a call from their lawyer, and when I asked her what they died from, she said carbon monoxide poisoning. I asked her what she was talking about. The cabin didn't even have gas. She said that her Uncle Ron had put in a central heater last year, adding that he probably just cheaped out on the installation, and then she started yelling, "But aren't you hearing me? I'm telling you they're gone." Well, she was crying, or at least pretending to, but I could also tell she was getting angry. Part of me wanted to tell her I knew she was lying, that Mom and Dad were fine. Sitting in my kitchen, however, another part, a stronger part, wanted to see where this was going. So, somewhere in the back of my mind, I was thinking, this is my chance. Finally, they're all going to see what a manipulative liar that she truly is. Jesus, Caroline. I paused as though I was in shock. I need to sit down. I pretended to cry, making my voice sound like I was actually sobbing. I asked her for details, and she said that she's gotten a call an hour ago from Killarney County Police. They found them both in bed, asphyxiated. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh! At that moment, my mom walked by the bedroom on her way to the bathroom, and she looked like she was going to say something to me, so I put my fingers to my lip, pretending that I was on a work call. I heard Caroline stop crying and clear her throat. When she spoke again, she sounded calmer. I guess she swallowed my performance and just really thought I believed her. So, she said that she thought that we would see each other eye to eye, and that it's not good to be alone at a time like this. Can you call James and arrange a meeting? She asked. I said I would call him, and then we said goodbye, with Caroline saying that she was so sorry to be the one to break the news, that she loved me and did not want me to worry. Everything would just be all right. Well, you know what? I just faked it until the last second, then I hung up and I laughed. My mom had finished in the bathroom and was standing by the door. Is everything all right, honey? I told her that the call was from work, and she said that she thought she heard me crying. Oh, well, one of the other agents is a real joker and always cracks me up to the point of tears. My parents were obviously tired and still had a few 100 miles to drive, and I decided not to tell them about Caroline's ploy, because even though it was funny to me that she'd been so insanely bold, I knew that Mom and Dad would be hurt and upset, and so we hugged and kissed goodbye, and I called James. He was confused as I was, although he was also pretty upset because he's also just always been more sensitive about stuff. What? Why the duck would she do that, man? Well, I said I wasn't sure. It was just another one of Caroline's twisted games. So James asked if we should not tell our parents in case Caroline tried to do something to hurt them. I don't think they were actually in danger, and I guess that whatever she was doing was probably about money. But we don't know until we meet with her, I said. So I convinced James to join us tomorrow morning because I was worried, though James is a terrible liar. The absolute opposite of Caroline. I did not think he would be able to keep a straight face. On the other hand, he is also such a nervous guy that I've literally seen him laugh at a funeral because of the discomfort. So maybe if it came to that, I could blame it on his nerves. Then I called Caroline back and we planned to meet at her house. I spent the rest of the evening relaxing with my cat and drinking G&Ts, trying to figure out, well, Caroline's long game. I'll update you when I find out. Update number 1. So, we met at Caroline's McMansion at 9 a.m. sharp the following day. I brought Danishes and coffee, and James showed up looking tired and disheveled, which, to be honest, is his habitual look. But it worked now, given the circumstances. Okay, under the crocodile tears, Caroline looked as though she had slept 8 hours uninterrupted. I bet she had. I bet she was feeling pretty damn good. Well, the phase 1 of her plan was complete. She started by sitting us down, insisting that we have a group hug. When we, quote, brought it in, I was surprised to notice that Caroline smelled a little boozy. And not last night boozy either, fresh like she's been drinking that morning. Although, with plenty of mouthwash on top, has she been celebrating, or was this a new development? Also, the house was kind of a disaster. Ever since she's lived there, Caroline had a house cleaner come twice a week. The place always sparkled, and now there were dishes in the sink and the floor looked sticky in the kitchen. There were kids' toys everywhere, and I asked how my nephews were. And Oliver. Caroline narrowed her eyes and said that they were just fine, thank you. Then she went back to being shocked and grieving Caroline. After we had been shocked and grieving for a while, she got to the point. Aside from needing to be among family at this time, there was a practical matter to attend to. She went to the credenza and took out a folder. This unpleasantness is Mom and Dad's final will and testament. She sniffed and just wiped a non-existent tear from her little eye. Sorry, said James. Why do we have to deal with that now? Shouldn't we go and check on Mom and Dad first to see if the bodies found were really theirs? I looked at him. For a second, it was as if he's forgotten it was all nothing more than a lie. I nudged him when Caroline wasn't looking. Well, go along with it, I mouthed, and he nodded. Caroline, she just simply looked at James, asking if he did not believe her. Our older sister went on to explain that she had gotten a call from a lawyer shortly after the call from the police, and I was wondering how come the lawyer came to know about Mom and Dad's death even before us. And He went ahead to call Caroline right after the police, but I did not point out this loophole in Caroline's narrative because eventually everything that she was saying or going to say was nothing more than a lie. So, Caroline says that the lawyer claimed to represent Mom and Dad, although I did not recognize the name, which was not that of their usual lawyer, a family friend. Caroline admitted that she's been skeptical as well, and she said that the lawyer, if he had contacted us, and he said he only had Caroline's number, as the eldest child, she had been nominated as the executor of the estate. So she just pretended that this had not eliminated her doubt. She went to the law office, and the lawyer had all the paperwork in order, signed by our parents and a witness, whose name Caroline did recognize as being that same family friend who did legal work for our parents in the past. She laid it out for us. Mom and Dad did not want us dealing with a hefty death tax on their estate transfer, so James, always skeptical, asked if this was really legal. While avoiding all eye contact, Caroline said it wasn't illegal, but rather a clever backdating trick. It sounds shady as hell. Yeah, but their lawyer gave it the green light, Caroline reassured us. We checked the paperwork and I asked why there was a rush. Caroline explained it's all time sensitive and that waiting would make the backdating look a bit fishy. She planned to split the estate after covering funeral costs, and she said there was a catch. We had to front the lawyer fee and transfer tax pronto. Well, James was actually short on cash, so I volunteered to cover. Caroline mentioned a big sum, asking for bank drafts by the weekend. I agreed, and Caroline, as the executor, wanted drafts in her name, for simplicity. We chatted briefly in a really superficial way about the kids and Ollie. Caroline seemed suspicious that I was asking about them or defensive of something. On the way home, James floated the idea of reporting it as fraud, and I suggested waiting for our parents' opinion, throwing in the idea of a road trip. Sure, I got nothing else going on. So, we decided to drive back to our parents' house so James could get his stuff. That's what he's doing right now as I type this out. Guys, I'm not sure I'll read all your replies, but it's good to have this account and have the story written out in one place. Who knows, this post might be read out loud in court one day. Updates to follow. Update number 2. The drive to the cabin is 6 hours if you don't stop. When we were kids going to visit Uncle Ron, my dad drove straight through. Maybe there would be one pee break, but other than that, it was sandwiches in the car and us driving each other bonkers in the back seat. James and I decided to visit Mom and Dad at the cabin, and we stopped to take a break from driving just now. He's a vapor, and I don't like smoke in my car. Also, we enjoy the luxury of taking as many pee breaks as we want. While he was vaping, I decided to take a peek at Caroline and Oliver's social media. I could not help but notice that she had stopped posting photos of the children, and there were pictures of Oliver in what looked like another state with my nephews. So I decided to DM him. He happened to be online and just replied to me straight away. Reaching out, I asked Oliver directly if everything was okay with Caroline. There was a pause, and I could see the 3 dots indicating that he was taking his time to chat. His message appeared on the screen, basically conveying the things were not okay. He had taken the kids to stay with their grandparents for a while, and I hesitated, apologizing if it was none of my business, Oliver reassured me that it's okay, expressing the relief of sharing with somebody who knows Caroline. I suggested a phone call, and we agreed to talk later that day. So James just came back from vaping, and we are now resuming our drive. Update number 4. By the time we arrived, it was evening and the sun was beginning to set. We pulled into Uncle Ron's lot and tree branches brushed the top of my vehicle. This was always my favorite part about driving there. Well, it was like we were entering a secret passage made of birch trees. Mom and Dad were outside, and Dad was building a fire while Mom sat doing a crossword puzzle. They were fully clothed, thank goodness, and I don't know why I thought they might not be. Obviously, they were super surprised to see us. Happy surprised, I'd say. Which was good, they wanted to know what we were even doing here. At first, we pretended that we've been going to a music festival at the last minute and decided to stop to say hello. I let that white lie go until after dinner when the shock of us being there had mellowed out a bit. I didn't want to give my father a heart attack. Mom, Dad, James and I are not really going to a music festival. We came because there's something very urgent to tell you. So, we told them the whole story from the phone call to the meeting to us coming up to tell them. We tried to be as objective as possible, and I did not want them to think that we were the ones out to get Caroline, who they still thought of as their responsible daughter. You know what? It was very hard for them, though. They did not know what to believe. Luckily, James has been smart. When Caroline wasn't paying attention, he took a picture of a photo of the fake documents with his Apple Watch. The photo was blurry, of course, but you could tell crystal clear that it was a document dealing with our parents' death. Dad expressed disbelief, stating this is insane. What do we even do? James and I shared glances and then carefully began outlining to our parents the manipulative actions Caroline had orchestrated since our childhood and beyond. In response to our mother's questions about why we did not come to them earlier, James insisted we did. You never believed us. His tone carried more sadness than anger, and I clarified that this was the reason why I left. My mother appeared on the verge of tears while Father clenched his jaw in pure anger. Just then, my phone rang and it was Oliver. So I excused myself and went to chat with him. He sounded sad but also weirdly happy. So, as it turns out, he's been struggling for a while with Caroline. You were right about her. She can't help it. It's pathological. She needs to control other people. It's got so bad that I had to get the kids out of there. So, I asked if she was drinking, and he said yes. She's been letting go from the bakery for showing up drunk a year before, and I was surprised to actually hear that. Oliver said Caroline had tried to force him to get her rehired. That was when things got really bad between them, and the drinking got worse, and she just stopped talking to him and the kids. One day, he looked at her credit card statement balance, and it was maxed out with Amazon purchases. Eventually, it got so bad that he just left. So, I told him I was really sorry and that I wished I could have helped in some way. He said that it's fine, his parents have been a big help. And he said, adding that he thought everything was going to be okay. Well, I grimaced. I had decided not to tell him about the fraud, and it sounded as though he had enough on his plate. Well, tell my nephew I said hi, is what I told him. Part of me was relieved that Caroline was finally hitting rock bottom. You can't go through life like that and expect everything always to go your way. You need to learn to cope with the fact that everyone has their own autonomy. Maybe there was hope for her, but for now, however, we need to protect Mom and Dad and deal with this fraud. We decided to not go to the police and handle this as a family. As far as we could tell, the false documents weren't the work of an actual lawyer. It seemed more likely Caroline had made them herself and was planning on pocketing the money. It was not a very thought-out plan, unless she was intending to run off to Mexico or something, which wasn't really her style. My dad could not fathom how Caroline thought that she would actually get away with this, claiming that he and Mom were dead. It was obvious that we would finally catch on to the hoax. I mean, come on. I told them Oliver had just called mentioning he was with Jake and Max at his parents' place, planning to stay there for a while. Well, Mom looked really surprised, and Caroline had not said anything about that. It did not surprise me. I told them, adding that Oliver mentioned that she's been drinking, running up debt, and lost her job at the bakery. Convincing my mom that Caroline was not the victim proved challenging. While she probably needs help, she had acted criminally. Despite that, my parents were still under her spell and wanted to give her a second chance. We decided to go talk to her, hoping that she could explain herself, though I doubt it. I tried to emphasize to my parents that there needs to be consequences to her actions, and she's getting away with stuff her entire life. We'll see if it really is understood in the morning, because we're going to drive back there together. Final update. We stopped at my place for lunch and then carried on to the suburbs where Caroline lives. Mom and Dad thought it would be better for them to talk to her alone, so I brought James home and then went into the office to do some work. Seeing my coworkers in real life, it felt really, really good. We'd been miniaturized versions of ourselves on Zoom for far too long. Later, I met my parents at their place, and James was there too.
I asked them how it went, but I didn't really need to know. The answer was written right there on their faces. It turns out that Caroline flat out denied everything. She claimed that we were the ones who approached her with the idea. She said that there was no financial need on her end, pointing to the leased SUV in the driveway and the enormous empty house around her. She said, "That?" James was incredulous, and I was less shocked, and I said, "Of course, she's not going to own up to it. She's in total denial, man." Mom shook her head, and Dad just added that they'd given her every opportunity to come clean. But she's sticking with her story, huh? Okay. I asked my father if Caroline seemed like she's been drinking, and he said no, that she appeared sober. James asked if the next step was finally to go to the police. Well, Mom was pretty explicit about avoiding any unnecessary drama. She mentioned that Caroline provided them with documents, and she claimed James and I had given her. She said that she would look them over and, go back and forth with her own lawyer to ensure the phony documents and would not cause any trouble in the future. Now, the will. As the will stood, Caroline was written in as the primary executor of the estate, encompassing the house, the 2 cars, and Dad's notable stock portfolio, which I actually had no idea about. Mom and Dad said they weren't entirely comfortable with Caroline overseeing everything, so you know what? They're going to make a few adjustments. In the event of their passing, Caroline would receive a reduced share, and James and I would inherit the majority. It would be up to us to determine the terms of Caroline's portion. Mom also informed us that they would be helping Caroline with some cash immediately. We could, get to decide how she got it and what she spent it on, making sure James and I kept the reins on Caroline's financial assistance. This was music to my ears. Finally, Caroline would have to accept that she was not in control of everything and everyone. I asked if I could be the one to tell her, and my mom said, "Yeah, sure, it's okay, but be careful," because she did not think Caroline was in her right mind. So, I left my parents with James and I drove over there. The lights were off, but I could see the TV on. The door was open, so I walked in. Caroline was passed out on the sofa, and there was a box of wine and the coffee table. I shook her awake. When I told her what was happening, she seemed confused. She wasn't drunk, having slept off the booze from before, then it clicked. She was getting left out. James and I were going to be in charge of her money. I watched the rage start to build up behind her eyes. For the next half hour, she screamed at me. She said that I was a liar, deceitful, and a selfish idiot. I just sat there because it doesn't matter. Caroline had run up against the wall, and she's gone all in on the last attempt to force us to do as she wished. It failed, as I told her it would. As she sat there on the sofa, looking at me and saying nothing, I genuinely hoped that she would get better. There are some good qualities to Caroline, and she taught me how to swim, how to ride a bike, and she is very protective. "You're going to regret this." I doubt it. We have proof of her attempt at fraud, and she knew it. Should she try anything else, we're just going to go to the police. I left her there, telling her I'd check in on her tomorrow. It felt good to take the high road, although I still didn't know what she had planned to do with the money that she was scamming James and me to give her. But you know what? Now it doesn't really matter, since I can assume a lot of things, and none of it matters. Guys, thank you for staying with me till the end.
I just don't understand at all what today's story was supposed to solve. The sister, there's no way she thought that she would actually get away with this. We're talking about 2 people who are still plenty alive and well. You don't think that they're going to show their face in a day or a week when they get back from the cabin? How did she think this was even going to play out? Anyways, guys, we see karma came very strong in today's video, and the parents are like, you know what? Maybe we should not give her all the inheritance. Maybe we should give it to OP and OP's brother and let them handle it, since they're obviously more well put together when it comes to money. Guys, let me know what you think about it, what you would have done, so drop it down below in the comment section. Thank you for joining me on today's video. My name's Mr. Reddito. I narrate stories like this every single day. So if you guys want to be a part of these daily stories, hit that subscribe button. I'll see you tomorrow, and of course remember, it's cool to be kind. Peace.